Video games are everywhere. 2/3 of American adults play games at least weekly. The value of the global market is bigger than Hollywood and the music industry combined. So with all these people having so much fun, it's no wonder that alarm bells start ringing. Parents worry about what all this screen time is doing to their kids, despite the fact that there's no strong evidence for harmful effects. In fact, we know that gaming can be beneficial in all sorts of ways, in connecting people, in building teamwork and collaboration skills, in allowing people to connect socially in ways that they might not otherwise be able to do. And what about this weird bit of parenting that some of us find ourselves doing? Not telling your children off for playing video games, but telling your children off for watching other people play video games on YouTube. When my son Isaac was a teenager, it was not at all uncommon to come across him sitting in front of a screen watching somebody else play Minecraft. I'm like, what's that all about? Now, of course, Minecraft has captured the hearts of millions, but elsewhere the industry has been facing headwinds, from the effects of post-pandemic unlocking, from supply chain bottlenecks, from issues around privacy. There have been job losses and even studio closures. Real human stories with real human consequences. So in this uncertain market, more and more game companies are saying, how do we create experiences that people keep coming back to? And this is particularly true with the shift towards mobile gaming, where the business model is more now about retention, about getting people to come to the game, and then there's the in-game advertising and in-game purchasing. So it's a different model to the old one, which was all about, can we get you to fork out 50 quid for the next disc for your console? It's not so much about how can I get people to buy this thing because they might be downloading it for free. It's about how do we get people to keep coming back to it? How do we keep people engaged with this experience? In so many ways, video games just keep getting better and better. Visuals are ever more realistic and compelling. The New Yorker ran an article recently on how tools like Unreal Engine are permeating more and more aspects of our everyday lives. If you've seen Barbie, you'll have seen some scenes that were created in Unreal Engine. What studios are doing with audio is stunning. You feel like you're actually there in that rainforest, in that medieval village, on that spaceship cruising across the galaxies. And yet, a common criticism of video games is still that they're just like watching a film. Now, film is, of course, can be incredibly immersive and vivid, but it doesn't have what gaming allows you to do. It doesn't have that extra thing, which is the potential for a truly interactive experience. When I'm sitting down to play a game, I can be a 7-foot warrior, I can be a medieval teenage princess, I can be an orc or an android or an assassin. I have incredible potential to sculpt who I am on the screen. I can change my body shape, my size, my skin color, my hair color. I can change my physical skills and prowess. But on the inside, at the level of subjective experience, at the level of those thoughts and feelings and emotions that make our lives, our conscious lives, feel the way they do, those inner worlds of game characters are not so often explored. So this is where my kind of science comes in. For 30 years or so, I've been researching what we call inner experience, which is basically just the stuff that's in your mind that you're conscious of, but that is mostly private to you. So we're talking thoughts, we're talking memories, we're talking visual images, we're talking emotions and feelings, all of that stuff. Now, when I was starting out, people would say to me, what? You can't have a science of that stuff? This stuff is unobservable. It's private. You can't stick it under a microscope. What kind of science is that? That has changed. Teams around the world are starting to show that you can indeed have a rigorous science of these phenomena. So an example, many people report a kind of internal conversation with themselves as they're going about their daily lives. They're talking to themselves silently. What we call inner speech comes in many different forms. It seems to have different functions in controlling our behavior, in regulating our emotions, in motivating ourselves. Some people don't seem to do very much of it at all. Everywhere we look, there's huge variation. Autobiographical memory is the term we give to our memories for the events of our own lives. Again, research is showing that memories differ in all sorts of ways, and the extent to which they're vivid, the kind of perspective they take, the extent to which they incorporate other kinds of sensory information, not just the visual, but the smells and the sounds and the tastes and so on. And we're starting to understand how these different qualities of memory are realized in the brain. A third example, hearing voices in the absence of any speaker, usually associated with severe mental illness. But more and more we're understanding that voice hearing is something that happens to all sorts of different people from all sorts of different walks of life. We're understanding the different forms it takes, the different causes it has, and this work in our therapeutic work in the region is having benefits. Just simply helping people to understand how voice hearing happens can be extremely beneficial. Okay, why should the gaming industry care about this? Because gaming is fundamentally about creating an experience in the mind of the user. Engaging with a narrative is about what happens in the physical world, it's about what you do, but it's also about how you feel and how you think. But gaming has evolved in such a way that the attention, the driver, has been about the visual, it's been about the physical, it's been about what you can depict on screen. And what that has meant is that those inner worlds of gaming characters have been less often explored. Now, of course, there are some wonderful exceptions to this rule. There always are. In Disco Elysium, a text-based game, you could play around with the thoughts and the motivations of the character in a really interesting way. But as a text-based game, Disco Elysium didn't really have the chance to depict the variety of subjective experience, all these different qualities of inner experience that I've been talking about. Another superb example, which I'll come back to, again, is Hellblade, where you play as Senua, an 8th century Pictish warrior, both in the original game, Senua's Sacrifice, and in the sequel to be released next week, Senua's Saga. You follow through Senua's inner experience and her unusual inner experience. Senua experiences psychosis. She hears voices, she sees things that are not there, she has unusual beliefs. And you as a player get to live that psychosis with her. Now, I was lucky enough to work with the Ninja Theory team on creating Hellblade. And after doing that work, I became more and more interested in what was out there in terms of the possibilities for gaming to represent inner experience in these ways. So I thought, let's find out some more. Let's see how this stuff is being done. So let's just run through those 3 examples I just gave you, beginning with inner speech. There is inner speech in video games. This is Heavy Rain. And in this game, you can press a button to actually listen in to the character's thoughts. But when you see those thoughts, they tend to be a bit like language would be in a social situation. We know that that's not how inner speech works. Inner speech is transformed as it becomes internal. It takes on all these interesting different forms. So the result that you see on screen is something that's a bit clunky and not really like real inner speech. This is memory as it works in 2013 Tomb Raider. One thing we know from years of research on memory is that it does not work like a video camera. Memory does not record events. Memory reconstructs events from all kinds of different bits of information spread all around the brain. It's a reconstruction made at the moment of remembering. It is not simply a recording of what happens. Now, it's not just gaming that gets it wrong here. This is a pretty common cultural trope. You see the same thing in TV and movies. I don't want to pin the blame on gaming in particular, but I think there's an opportunity here. Now, if you contrast that with what happened with Hellblade, with Senua's psychosis, what I did is I went to talk to the team who were making the game. I took them through the latest science of inner experience as it related to hearing voices, what kinds of people this happens to, the fact that voices take all these different forms, that they can be positive and guiding as well as negative and commanding sometimes, the sorts of different reasons why people hear voices, the fact that voices take on characters of their own. So Senua's voices are like a whole sort of suite, a whole chorus of different characters in her mind. And you as the player get to live that with them in the most extraordinary way. So it seems to me that the gaming industry and the creative industries in general could benefit from understanding this kind of stuff a bit more. And that's the reason, the motivation behind the spin-out from Durham University that I've set up, InnerScape. We're talking to the gaming industry. We're also working with film and TV and theatre companies. And it's partly about how we could depict inner experience on the screen in ways that had not been done before. That seems to me to create all sorts of interesting new imaginative and creative possibilities for gaming. It goes further than that. It's about giving the player control over what kind of mind is depicted on the screen. Remember about being able to set the physical parameters of your character. I can change my body shape, I can change my skin color. Why can't I do the same thing with the mind of the character that I'm playing? Why can't I sculpt inner experience? I think gaming absolutely has that potential in a way that no other creative form does. And it goes even further than that. It starts to be about narrative. If you talk to any novelist, if you listen to the voiceover of any film, you'll know that narratives happen, things happen in the world. People get out of bed not because a bomb's gone off or because an assassin is abseiling through the skylight. Well, yeah, sometimes. But because people have thoughts, they have feelings, they have desires, they have memories. That's what makes the world go round. And any novelist will tell you that that three-way interaction between character, experience, and behavior is absolutely essential to making a narrative work. If you don't get that right, if it isn't in some way driven by inner experience, it's not going to be a satisfying narrative. It's not going to be a compelling one. So what's at stake here, I think, is something to do with realism. It's something to do with the engagingness of game narratives. It's about their memorability. It's about their moral complexity. It's about their emotional connection. And these are all things that I think could potentially be pushed forward through this approach. We're effectively talking about user engagement, deepening user engagement. And in their latest gaming report, Unity point out that this is one of the top 5 trends in the industry at the moment. How can we connect with our users even more deeply? Can see has the potential to take that idea forward. So we're asking not just how do you depict inner experience on the screen, but how can you give people playing games a different kind of opportunity? Rather than taking your own mind into that gaming situation, sitting down at the console, switching on, I'm me in this game, I think gaming could give you the potential to be a different kind of mind, to try out being somebody else for the day, for the evening, for the gaming session. See what it's like to not have any inner speech when you've got inner speech going on all the time. See what it's like to hear voices or have different kinds of memory experiences. Now, the results might have the kind of power that Hellblade has had. So, okay, yeah, it sold lots of copies. It had a brilliant critical reception. It won a bunch of BAFTAs. But for me, and I think for many of the Ninja Theory team, the most important thing was the way it was received by the mental health community. So I would really recommend checking out this accolades trailer on YouTube, which is basically made up of all the things that people have said, or some of the things that people have said when they've written to Ninja Theory saying how this game has changed their lives. It's absolutely amazing, and I can't watch it without tearing up. And people saying, I was never able to talk to anybody about my psychosis. I couldn't tell my wife, I couldn't tell my children, I couldn't tell my workmates. Now I can because of this game. I can point to this game and say, that's what it's like. So gaming, I think, has an incredible power to work for the good. It can build communities, maintain communities, create connections, do all sorts of wonderful things. Back to the thing about watching other people, watching YouTube playthroughs. This is me this week. I'm watching other people play video games on YouTube. I like to multitask, so I'm doing my fitness hula hooping at the same time. The reason is there's so much out there. There's so much I want to learn about gaming. There's so much variety, and this is a really effective, efficient way of doing it. But of course, I'm doing exactly what I told my son off for doing just a few years ago. And above all, it's not about some worthy educational ideal. Games are about fun. They have to be about fun. This is possibly a way of making them a little bit more interesting, a little bit more different, a little bit more engaging, and therefore a bit more fun. And actually, I think paying attention to all this stuff is beneficial in all sorts of ways. It can be therapeutic, it can be restorative, just simply knowing what's going on in your own mind. And gaming, I think, is a really powerful way of driving that ideal forward. Thank you.
So thank you, and really interesting. So when you talked at the beginning of the talk, you mentioned that some people have quite a lot of inner experience, and others seem to have relatively little. Is that right? Is there a spectrum where some people are hearing voices all the time, and others either don't or very rarely? Is that?
Yeah, there's spectrums everywhere. People have different kinds of quality of memory. Some people don't use any inner speech. Some people use lots. There's this thing called aphantasia, where some people don't have any visual imagery, whereas other people are doing having lots of it. Yeah. So there's just a huge amount of variety and difference, and we differ within ourselves. Sometimes I'm doing a particular kind of inner speech, sometimes I'm not. So it's that extraordinary variety that I think gaming, above any other kind of creative art, has the capacity to tap into.
Okay, so I'm out of curiosity, are there typical sorts of personality types that tend to have low inner experience versus those who are high, or is it not that defined?
I think most people have some kind of inner experience. It's just if you take inner speech, for example, some people will just say they don't do very much of that at all, and some people will say they're doing a lot. We don't really know the answer to that question. Okay. We're starting to understand how all this stuff works in the brain. Yeah. People are starting to do research on these people who don't seem to use much
How old a field is inner experience as a research field? I mean, it sounds relatively young.
Well, for a long time, people, as I said, when I started out, people would say to me, you can't study this stuff. You can't be, you can't be objective because you can't measure it. You can't put it under a microscope. So forget it. You can't have a science of that. But that's the result of all sorts of cultural and scientific historical changes that we won't go into now. But basically, it's a reaction against people saying you can't do that because we've shown you can do it. It's not easy, and you have to change your methods, and you have to be smart, and you have to take your time. But it can be done. Okay.
So would it be fair to say that the bulk of gaming today operates in a relatively limited part of the emotional spectrum? Would that be fair?
I think games can be incredibly vivid and powerful experiences, and deeply, deeply emotionally engaging. Okay. I just think they can, if they take some of this on, they might, go somewhere else. In an interesting way. Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess the whole point of applying inner experience to games is to greatly expand that emotional range, or at least the depth of that emotional range? Would that be?
I think that's true. I think, that's why narratives work, because they're not just about what happens on the outside. Yeah. So I think when people are running into problems with games that seem like, I don't really care what happens, there's all sorts of stuff happening, but I don't kind of really care, That might be because of this lack of emotional engagement that could come from a deeper engagement with motivations and thoughts and feelings and memories and all this stuff.
And as such, I mean, one of the things I find fascinating about games and gaming in general is that I think its impact into our popular, people and culture and things like that, just the sheer size of the sheer the market value give is actually, I think it's underappreciated about how big and impactful it already is. And what I'm wondering about is, assuming you're successful in this, would you see the reach of games expanding as well to other people that might currently just say, games is not for me, but because of the impact of inner experience, they kind of realize, wow, okay, this is actually a far more compelling experience than I thought games were about?
Yeah, I mean, there's not a lot of kind of progress to be made in the States if 2/3 of adults are playing once a week. Of course there is, and I think games can just become better. They will evolve into more compelling narrative experiences. So, yeah, I think it will allow, more people will be reached. People who wouldn't normally think of sitting down to play a game, perhaps, will do so. So that will expand the market inevitably.
Okay. So, I mean, given that games for some people is already a super compelling, addictive experience where they devote all their spare time, and maybe some of their non-spare time will be devoted to games as well, sort of thing. Is there something where basically this, by applying your stuff, it just becomes that much more compelling and addictive and consuming, and as a genuine, almost alternative lifestyle to whatever people do today?
Yeah, I guess there's a worry that, some people might say, okay, games are already addictive enough. I don't want my kids spending any more time playing with them. I guess I'm thinking about this as a form of, human endeavor and creativity and art that will want to keep getting better. And it may be that as games get better, people don't actually spend as much time. Maybe they take some of the, complexity and the moral, engagement and emotional engagement back out into real life with them.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you say as well, though, that to not think of this in the terms of the sort of the good stuff it can do, but it seems to me like that actually is a big part of the potential, is that you can achieve certain positive outcomes, pro-social outcomes, because the experience is actually so compelling.
Yeah, so I mean, when I started working with Ninja Theory on Hellblade, I thought, I can go on Radio 4 and talk about voice hearing until I'm blue in the face, and believe me, I have.
Yeah.
And I can reach a certain number of people. I can reach a Radio 4 audience. I knew straight away that with Hellblade, we had the potential to reach many, many more people who would never show up to a talk by me on Inner Experience, but who we would still be reaching. And that gaming is here. It's here to stay. It's all over. It's everywhere. Can we make it better? It is a force to the good, I think. Can we make it even more of a force to the good by reaching more people and maybe getting across different messages, and this empowerment idea that we can help people to understand this message is exciting to me.
Cool. Charles, thank you so much.
Thanks, Herb.
Thank you.